I'm Lauren Shepard, the Outreach Coordinator here at the Pulitzer Center. I work with Anne and Kim on the Campus Consortium and with all of you student fellows. For our second panel on storytelling and pitching, we have these journalists and editors that have come to explore what they've learned about how you come up with the why to a story. First we have, I'll introduce you all, and then if you'd like to kind of tell a little bit about what you're working on now. Anup Kaphle is the Pulitzer Center grantee, most recently reporting on migrant labor in Nepal. And he's the deputy foreign editor at BuzzFeed News, and was previously the digital foreign editor at the Washington Post, where he oversaw the Post's world coverage on the web. He was previously producer at the Washington Post and digital media fellow at the Atlantic. Anup has reported from Afghanistan and Nepal, and his work has appeared in the Washington Post, Foreign Policy, the Atlantic, and CBC, among others. Then we'll have Nicholas Schmidle, a staff writer at the New Yorker, and he was a 2013 and 2014 finalist in the Livingston Awards for his stories, some of which were on Russian arms trafficking, post-traumatic stress, crimes in Kosovo, murder in Chicago, among many others. Previously, he contributed to the New York Times Magazine, The Atlantic, New Republic, Slate, and many other publications. Then we'll have Cara Darton. She is the managing editor and executive producer of Retro Report, the online news nonprofit that she'll tell you a lot more about. She was previously producer at CBS News and has worked at Videos News International and ABC News. And finally, we'll have Mark Dolan. He's the president of the National Press Photographers Association and is currently a professor teaching photojournalism and new media in the School of Mass Communications and Media Arts at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. And hopefully he'll tell us a little bit about his interesting ride all the way to journalism at age 30. So he kind of went all over the place, and now he's in the world of journalism for good. So I will be talking a little bit about storytelling, data-driven stories, long-form journalism, and how you may convey scientific stories as well. But I think I'll let them get to it, and we'll have a Q&A afterward. So hold your questions to the end. Thank you. Here's Anup.
I'm supposed to stand, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Morning, everybody.
Morning. There you go.
I was actually waiting for everyone to say good morning. So my relationship with Pulitzer Center goes back to, I think, about 2008. And right after I finished graduate school, and I went to Nepal to report on the Maoists. There was an insurgency going on. And so I was working for the Washington Post. And I was trying to figure out a way to pitch the story that had been reported so many times and many people had sort of like lost their interest over. So early on, I started realizing that, you know, when you are sort of like pitching a story, something like that, you could sort of like, you know, present multiple different aspects. In graduate school, we were sort of taught about the importance of multimedia reporting. So what I did was I was actually reaching out to Foreign Policy magazine for a long form magazine reporting, to the Washington Post for a reported news story, to CBC for a radio story, and to another station for a TV news story. And I think, you know, that's the pattern sort of, you know, I followed throughout. And during my time as a digital sort of foreign editor, we took pitches from outside as well. And we worked with a lot of other Pulitzer Center fellows who reported from around the world. This summer I moved to BuzzFeed, and now I have a completely like different job. I'm an editor, and one of the things I do is not, you know, besides sort of editing our correspondence, we have now 15 people so far around the world. We are huge with taking freelance work from around the world. We take pitches everywhere from like Myanmar to, you know, Bangladesh to, you know, Mexico, anywhere really. And one of the things we're trying to focus on is something that not a lot of like mainstream publications are doing. So right now I'm receiving at least 3 pitches a day on Myanmar elections. It's been about a week, and I haven't liked a single pitch, because everything is just surrounded around, hey, by the way, did you know that there are elections happening in Myanmar? And I would like to do a story. No specifics, right? So one of the things I do is I try to go back and forth with some freelancers and whether I can sort of craft this pitch into something that we're going to like and something that, BuzzFeed readers are going to want to look. And I want to talk about that a little bit more later during Q&A about how our readership is a little bit different than, they say, something like the Washington Post, where we're considered the millennial readership, like 18 to 35, where people really want to have interest in the world, and not just from a policy standpoint, but from the human interest standpoint as well. So I hope to discuss a lot of that with you later.
Great. Stand here or at the podium?
Well, Anup, why don't you slide?
Oh, I slide. That's right. All right. So I'm not going to talk about shaping and pitching really so much, but we can later, clearly. I just wanted to talk. I don't really need this, do I?
We're actually recording, so if you could use.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I was going to talk a little bit about investigative journalism, and about how you go about doing it when you're not really sure how to get started doing it. So I think that any journalism worth doing is going to be investigative in nature, whether you're writing a profile and searching out some deeper truth about someone, or whether you're looking for evidence of government malfeasance or something. You're always, if you're not trying to get at something that is not accessible to the rest of the public, then sort of why do it? Sure. Can you hear me now? All right. Sorry about that. Do I need to start all over again? And so, but there are many ways to do that. I think there's a perception that all investigative journalism is sort of banging phones and yelling at government officials to tell me what the fuck I want or something like that. And it's really, it's much more delicate than that. And a lot of it is based on, there is a lot based on building trust with sources, but there's a lot on and in the national security realm, of course, it's having sources that trust that you are not going to reveal their names or identities in a way that could land them in trouble or land them in jail, but also building trust with sources of people who aren't used to dealing with journalists at all, convincing them to give you the passwords to their phone so you can look in old messages. So I will talk a little bit about a piece that I have running in the magazine on Monday that just was finished this week, and is about some of the issues I think you all were discussing yesterday about refugees. Also gets back to what Anup was just mentioning. So, this summer, in the middle of the summer, as the refugee crisis in Europe was happening, it seemed to me that there was no one had done a story that took a single refugee and tracked their journey all the way from displacement to Europe, and had done so in a way that was, how we at the New Yorker try and tell stories in a sort of cinematic, long-winded, overly way. And so I convinced this, and also I kind of came from more traditional foreign correspondence, going places, looking for stories there, looking for sort of angles. And now at the New Yorker, just because of the luxury of time, really, have been able to sink in, writing 2, 3, 4, sometimes stories a year. It just kind of gives you a different metric and approach to what seems like a story worth investigating and how you go about doing it. But going back to this refugee story, so I eventually found this refugee, this young man who was a former law school student who was in Sweden, and began through friends convincing him that he should tell his story. Now, his idea of telling his story initially was through WhatsApp with a bunch of people, with some English speakers, some Arabic speakers on the message, him telling me parts of the story. There was never a translator there when the message came in. So then he would send me this long bit of text. I would put it into Google Translate and be like, all right, I think I understand it. Go back and be like, okay, so this is what happened, blah, 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 blah. Clearly, there's no way that's going to fit for a 9,000-word New Yorker story. So I was in Sweden on another piece and decided that it was smart to try and go and just meet this guy and try and build some rapport. And so I went and spent the day with him in Gothenburg. I had 6 hours from the time that my train arrived till the time that I had to get back on the train to go back to Stockholm, and thought that in those 6 hours, he said, I've got this English-speaking friend, a dentist who will be with us all day. We'll be able to, go through my whole story. Of course, we get there, and the dentist English, it's good enough to buy a cup of coffee. It's not good enough to sink into sort of details of, what made you decide to leave, what do your family think, and so part of initially, but what that did was just spending time with him face to face allowed us to have some trust. And here's the thing: is that everyone, you have to sort of be many things to multiple people, and that's not that, and do it in a way that is genuine and sincere. People, sources, everyone will sort of knows if you're, trying to con them, trying to pretend like you're something you're not. But you've got some connection to everybody. So with this guy, we quickly established that both of us were fans of English Premier League soccer, which is just the greatest sort of entree into all people around the world. If you're not a soccer fan now, you should become one. But so that was with him. But then as I was speaking to, there was a woman who was on his journey who I had to sort of, she didn't care about soccer. There's no reason to emphasize that. She was an English teacher. So then you could talk about, she traveled with her 4-year-old son. So at that point, then I'm emphasizing the fact that I'm a father and I have a 4-year-old son. So you sort of, you find those bonds and those ways to convince people that you are telling their story. And eventually, this young Syrian law school student, convinced us, or we convinced him to kind of do something that seemed ridiculous in the beginning, which is, give us your Facebook password and username so we can look in and find the old messages that you were sending family over the course of your journey. And those old messages, now you've got like a real-time voice filling in the story. So it's not just him saying, yeah, when we were stuck at that point in the trip, I was really scared and I didn't think we were going to make it. Now you've got him sending his mother or his sister-in-law messages saying, I'm going to kill myself. This sucks. Like I left such a good, like my situation in Syria doesn't seem so bad right now when I'm realizing that I've been sitting in Turkey for the past 6 months. And now you've got like real despair and dread. So, but I think that, there are a lot of ways to do that. And this story in the end is, it is an investigative story because we eventually convinced him to give us the, who were the smugglers that were letting you in. We eventually tracked down the smugglers, figured out how they do their business. How do they make their money? There's this Syrian guy who runs his Facebook page, and he is like a real-time Harriet Tubman. This guy has a phone. He has his own channel on this app, and Syrians call him from Europe at all hours and say, I'm at the border, here's my coordinates, send them a dropped pin, and he then sends them annotated maps of how to get around the border, where the border guards are based on, it's like Waze, and he's got all this real-time information coming in. So in that sense, we've been able, I think, to sort of lift the veil on how the whole thing works, add some human element or human interest element to it. And keep it from being kind of a interesting but dry investigative piece. So we can talk more afterwards.
Musical chair. So before I start talking about Retro Report, I wanted to tell you guys that so I worked at 60 Minutes for 15 years and traveled the world and worked on all sorts of stories. But my most defining experience was right when I graduated from college. I had a really small fellowship and I made a short film in Northern Ireland. And it was different from all of your projects because it was really bad. But I still today, 20-something years later, think of that experience. And I learn more doing that and I draw on that more. So I hope you guys realize how lucky you are to have finished these projects. So Retro Report is a nonprofit news organization. Sarah described it well. We produce short documentaries or long form digital documentaries, depending on your perspective, 10 to 14-minute videos. And the premise is to look back and re-report and re-examine old news stories, and most importantly for us, how they continue to impact today. What we got wrong, what we didn't get wrong, what we can know, the mistakes that were made. Sarah talked a lot about the population bomb stories, you get that, but we're really generalists. So I have a little less than a minute long video that shows you the kind of things we do, if we can get it to play.
Katrina Katrina had built into a dangerous Category 5 hurricane barreling towards New Orleans.
We didn't have an instruction book to tell us how to do this.
He's the sweetest killer whale known to man.
In the movie, he jumps to freedom. But what about in real life?
Scientists in Scotland had successfully cloned a sheep.
People began to say, well, couldn't we do this with humans? People tended to assume that this would happen.
An 81-year-old woman has sued McDonald's, claiming their coffee was too hot.
Once everybody decides what is true about something, how do you deal with the fact that they might be wrong?
Okay. Okay. So that gives you a little bit of sense of the kind of things that we do. But we have about 20 reporters on staff, reporters, producers, and we do work with freelancers. So we get a lot of proposals. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I look for in those proposals, because you guys are all going to start thinking that way, the kind of proposals you want to write. And I think that the things that I look for translate medium and form, right? So you could be working on a long form magazine piece, you could be working on a feature length doc, you could be working on a 10 to 14 minute digital documentary, and they're all kind of the same things. Of course, the most important thing is the idea, but also knowing the place that you're pitching, right? So we care a lot about how history is impacting today. So if you get a pitch that is only historical, or you get a pitch that doesn't actually fully bring you to today, clearly that's not the kind of story that we would be interested in. One of the first pieces that we did that will give you a sense of the breadth is on the so-called crack baby epidemic in the 1980s. So there were all these stories, there was going to be this generation of crack babies damaged like any, beyond repair, that social services would be overwhelmed. Well, here we are all these years later, and what happened? And we went back and found that a lot of the hysterical coverage was based on one study of 23 babies, and the researcher didn't control for things like maternal lifestyle and alcohol, and over time it became clear that these effects weren't as devastated as everyone had feared. And of course, the initial policy response was to incarcerate pregnant women who had cocaine in their bloodstream. So this was the perfect story for us because it was hyped in the press, and there was all these coverage of people saying, this is the end of the world as we know it. But what really drove it home was in the last few years, we started to see stories about oxytots and meth babies. And it was the same kind of hysterical coverage. And a lot of them, they would talk about the crack baby epidemic, but they would miss the part that actually over 30 years, all the science had shown that it wasn't as devastating as we'd feared. So for us, we're also judging and reporting on the impact. And it takes a lot of time to really think through what's a story that has that kind of breadth. And, it's a different form of investigative reporting, but it is still judging the impact of a seminal moment and how we keep making the same mistakes. And then the second part, of course, is also really obvious, but important to think about is storytelling, how you even write your pitch and how you will convey information. Certainly on the web, if you want to keep somebody watching a 14, 15-minute video, it has to be really compelling and really well done. And I think our story this week, which was on the grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo in Argentina, and you guys should all go watch it, is a good example of it. It was 15 minutes, and it's the story of the first 7 are basically backstory, the story of the dictatorship in Argentina from 1976 to 83, and this one woman whose daughter disappears, and she realizes she's pregnant, and she spent the next nearly 40 years searching for her missing grandchild. And the way the producer structured the story is the first story is all backstory, and you kind of think, well, maybe it's ending, and then you meet the grandson, and he just finds out that he was adopted, and he doesn't know, and he goes and gets his blood test, and all of a sudden, and you know it as a viewer, but to see that moment where they're reunited is just really, you can't watch it without crying because it's so moving, and I think tells you more about the conflict and about the search for, closure in all these cases. And also the deeper story, which is also always important to be thinking about. So this grandmother has called always for the prosecution of these families who adopted these children. But now she's calling for the prosecution of her grandson's adopted parents whom he loves, right? So it's that conflict when the political becomes personal and how she navigates that line. And I think everyone can relate to it. And that's, you know, a 15-minute video, and we beat out all the other, you know, fashion and recipe videos and cat videos. But I think a human rights video about Argentina doing that well is a testament to the way that story was told. So those are the things to think about. And I think put a lot of work into the way you're thinking of shaping a story, reporting a story, and also knowing when to walk away. We spent a lot of time on a mad cow disease story. We're convinced it's the perfect retro report. We were all going to die from eating hamburgers, and we didn't, right? But we couldn't really figure out where it went after you said we didn't, right? The science is still confusing and gray, and what does it mean? And it wasn't enough. And that poor producer spent, weeks and weeks. And finally said, you know what, I don't really have that much to say. So it's important to know when to walk away as much as when to, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Thanks.
Yeah, so there you go.
Hi, I guess I should tell you a little bit about myself. Lauren kind of hinted at my background. I did a lot of things before. I'm a high school dropout. I worked as a garbage man, hay baler, watermelon picker, before I went to school and got a degree in journalism when I was 30. And then just kind of kept going and never looked back until about 98 and I worked as a picture editor, a photographer, director of photography at papers in Florida and New England, Alaska. In 98, I went to teach at Syracuse University, and I wound up being there for 7 years, and it was the longest I'd ever been anywhere, because in the journalism world, you're often moving around, and it was an incredible experience. But I turned 50, and I had what I like to call my first midlife crisis, and I quit my job and sold my house and decided to drive around the country for a year and see family and friends. And then I decided, if I'm going to do that, I need to have my own documentary project. And I knew I'd been really wanting to play with audio, which I'd been playing with, but I wanted to immerse myself in it. So I decided to do a project using audio and still photography and documenting barbecue in America. Sounds like a funny thing to do, and it is kind of a funny thing to do, but it was also fun. And I just kind of taught myself audio along the way and multimedia producing. And now I've gotten into video and everything as well, but most of the stuff for my project has all been still photography and audio. So I'm going to really talk to you today about audio and just a few things to keep in mind, a few things that I learned. Most of the pieces, like you talk about 15-minute pieces, that's kind of long for on the web. Now, if it's good, it's all dependent on how good it is. But when I was starting to do the research on this, and I'm reading what previous researchers have said, and they say that most people's attention span is about 4 minutes for one of these multimedia pieces. 4 minutes, that's not a lot of time. And I tried, so that was kind of what I had for my window, what I was looking to do. But I was really trying to keep it more down to 3 minutes. So you need to understand that once you introduce audio, audio rules. You've really got to have good audio first. And visual people, particularly still photographers who get into multimedia, some of them resent that. What do you mean audio rules? I'm a photographer. My picture should. But you really got to have a good, strong narrative. And you've got to have people with you, because people will sit through a piece that has good audio and kind of average or bad pictures. Much more likely to sit through a piece than to have a piece that has really good images but terrible audio. You just can't, they can't stand it. So the other thing too is in terms of the time, like I mentioned before, people might sit through 8, 9, 4-minute pieces, 3-minute pieces, but they're not even going to sit through one 10-minute piece often. So because it's always a matter of time. So there's a couple things I'm gonna explain to you. Okay, so I'm just gonna show you a couple of pieces from mine. from my project, and I've got something else I'm going to show you. But because of the time factor, like, you have to know what story it is that you want to tell. So there was a couple of times when, and this happened early on, and it was a really good experience for me, where I knew there was just this little side element of a story, and it was really very interesting, and I wanted to tell that story. So often I would edit that part first, and I'm editing the audio. I don't even look at, I mean, I look at the images, but I edit for audio first and get my piece to the length I want it, and I think how I'm going to fill in the visuals. So for example, I'll show you. So one of the first pieces I did was on this guy. A friend of mine told me about this guy who sells barbecue in Vermont out of an old school bus, and he had a pet potbelly pig walking around the place. So I'm editing that pig story first, or that pig part of it, because that was just so interesting to me. And then I got to this point, and I realized how long it was just editing this. And I realized I don't have enough time to tell the rest of the story if I'm going to keep under that window. So that's early on. It gave me the whole idea of incorporating sidebars, which is, you know, it's done all the time in print journalism. It's been done forever, but I wasn't thinking about that at first. So, and that's helped me since. So I'm just going to show you this one and another one of my projects.
Looking at.
Okay, so here's a separate thing. You guys are welcome to go on the site, my site, www.bbqpilgrim.com, and just see what I see. See what I was talking about, and maybe we'll be able to still see it later.
Yeah,
but the main thing is I wanted to get that idea across to you about having a sidebar. Like, if there's a really interesting part of it, edit that part of it, because I mean, when I edit audio, I tend to work in terms of much like I would a story. You know, the most important thing I have to decide, and I decide this by the audio, by the soundbite itself. I want to know, how am I going to start it? How am I going to end it? And then I fill in the middle. So I want to know what the beginning is. I want the beginning to have, you know, really kind of grab people and maybe pique their curiosity. What's this about? What's about to come? And I want to end it on a nice statement. And then I kind of fill in between. So sometimes those in-betweens, though, like I said, with these sidebars, like this little potbelly pig, I got to hear the story about this pig. So, like I said, that fortunately, early on in my project, gave me the idea of utilizing sidebars, and I think it really helped me a lot later on. So now this is something I'm going to show you. This is another thing I think is very important for you guys to be thinking about. As you're going out there, it's great that you're doing these projects, but you want to see who's going to run these projects, who's going to publish them, who's going to get the word out there. You want to, the whole purpose of doing a story, obviously, is to show it. Well, this is something I saw, a guy named Sean Gallagher, who's often supported by the Pulitzer Center. You guys, he's done wonderful projects with them. First time I saw this project, I just thought it was genius. And the way he handled, very simply and effectively, a way to reach two audiences at once. So he does this thing that when he has somebody that's speaking Chinese, he has English subtitles. And when he has somebody that's speaking English, he has Chinese subtitles. My goodness, it was like when I said it's so simple and it's so effective. And believe me, if you are pitching a story to different publications, different websites, everybody's wondering how to reach multiple audience. So if you have that ability to bring that into your pieces, that really, I think, opens up your effectiveness and how they're going to view you as a potential continuing contributor. So let's try this.
Really zoom in while we're
There we go.
It's gonna buffer it. Yeah.
Turn off HD.
Okay. Turning off HD. You guys are a very patient bunch. I appreciate it.
HD.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
The Chinese alligator is one of the most threatened species in China. Inhabiting the ponds, streams, and lakes of the Yangtze River, the country's only crocodilian has come under threat as China's rush to develop pushes it closer to the brink of extinction.
在过去几个世纪， 扬子鳄的这个数量下降非常非常的这个可怕。那么在1998年的这个调查当中，就发现我们野生的扬子鳄只剩了120头。那么过去您是上万头或者说几百万头这样的这个数量级的这个状况。那么这个下降的这个主要的原因，在50、60年代，出现大量的这个围湖造田，还有就是把这个物种作为一个害兽，因为他们认为是一个竞争性的一个物种，那么养了鱼啊的其他的这些水生生物可能会被这个扬子鳄吃掉。另外呢，可能就是人口增加的越来越多，所以有扬子鳄的地方，他们的栖息地一个是变成农田，另外呢，人越来越多，肯定也不喜欢旁边有这么一个危险的一个物种存在。
The Anhui Research Center for Alligator Reproduction in central China is on the forefront of what is now an effort to save the Chinese alligator. Its state-sponsored captive breeding program has seen a rapid increase in the number of Chinese alligators. Concerns remain, however, for the wild populations.
所以从那以后，当然从70、80年代，我们国家国家政府就已经意识到这个物种数量已经非常濒危，所以建立了安徽扬子鳄保护区和这个繁殖中心，那么开始了大量的繁殖工作。那么这个繁殖工作也非常非常成功，到现在刚开始可能是抓了200头左右，那么现在已经到了1万头，1万多头。所以人工繁殖技术已经是不存在问题了，但是野外的这个状况仍然是没有太多的这个改变。
Xie Yan is one of a small and concerned group who are behind the current push to conserve the remaining Chinese alligators. On visiting the breeding center in Anhui, she joins local staff.
So it's seamless.
So anyway, that again, that's something you can go back to and view on the Pulitzer site or on Sean Gallagher's site. But again, it's just something for you to think about, and it puts bullets in your weapons arsenal in terms of, and I mean weapons arsenal in terms of getting jobs and getting hired. That's something that's going to be of a lot of interest to a lot of people. So I guess now we have more time for Q&A.
I'll take that quick.
Does anybody have a question to start?
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was just thinking as I'm sitting listening that a lot of people in this room are really interested in sitting where you guys are and having these experiences, being able to work around the world. And for many of us, as you know, like media is changing. We don't exactly know. The landscape isn't the same as it used to be. So what advice do you have for what you would do if you were early in your career to be able to do the work that you do today?
You want to start, Mark?
I'll start. I mean, I think you're doing it. You mean to be in this room, for you guys either just out of school or still some of you not having graduated, to be starting off your career, having done stories, national or international stories, it's such a much bigger head start than I ever had. I mean, that's huge. So you should all be very proud of yourselves. I mean, I think that says a lot and it's going to say a lot on your resume, and other people are going to recognize that.
Yeah, no, I would, excuse me, I would second that. I mean, I think that the model of starting as a cub reporter and working your way up, I don't see it. I mean, it's a pretty unsustainable model at this point. So I think that just exactly the same thing. The way to do it is to be going places, reporting stories, whether it's on someone else's dime or whether even sometimes in the beginning it's on your own dime. But you've got to, you have to sort of, I feel like, and Anup could speak to this as well, but I feel like you have a lot more traction if you are in country X and you say, I mean, no one is going to hire you to go to Myanmar and to cover the elections. But if you happen to be in India or someplace and you say, There's this interesting story that I've been tracking from here. And you know, lay it out like it's an hour-long flight. It's $150. I can get there and I can go spend 2 days and report that story. All of a sudden now, you've shown that editor that you're committed. You're already there. You're ready to do the legwork. You've already thought about the logistics. You've already told them how much it's going to cost, which is a huge thing. And you know, you've got to, you kind of, you're already, your hands are already dirty. So the fact that you're already out in the field just gives you a massive leg up in terms of pitching. And you know, but you're right, it's a crowded field. And so how do you stand out? Stand out by writing not more stories. People don't really count the number of stories, but better stories, ones that have better character development or show that you spent an extra 3 days investigating, you know, some issue rather than just kind of having thought, I've got enough at this point. So, but again, I think that you're starting on the right track.
Nick, maybe before we leave you, give us an example. What was a breakthrough pitch and story for you early on?
Well, no doubt. I mean, the breakthrough. So I, in grad school, had an opportunity to go spend the summer of 2004 studying at Tehran University, learning Farsi at the University of Tehran. So I went as a student on a student visa, but knew from the minute, you know, knew that I wanted to try and somehow squeeze some journalism out of that. So that gave me, so, you know, I came back and at that point, you know, we were gangbusters in Iraq and it looked like we were going to Iran next. And it was kind of a night, you know, I could come back to DC and write a couple of stories that were, I thought at least I had some ground knowledge of what was going on in Iran. I don't think anyone read those stories, but it gave you a little bit of confidence. So I proposed, the biggest pitch was a fellowship proposal I wrote to actually an office that's here in this same floor, the Institute of Current World Affairs. And I proposed that I wanted to go and spend 2 years in Iran. And my whole pitch was that, you know, I'm not a journalist. I don't really know anything about journalism, but I just spent the summer in Iran. I have some experience. I think that I can get a visa for 2 years. And, you know, I'm sort of wild-eyed, eager, and ready to do this. And so I got that fellowship. And then I got the fellowship, and then I couldn't get into Iran. So I went back to them. I wanted to do something about identity politics in Iran. And I went back to them and I said, you know, there's this country next door, Pakistan. They have some messed up identity issues. Could I possibly go there and do my 2 years there? And went, and so sort of that was the experience. You're getting, but it was you know, much like you have with your Pulitzer fellowships. You know, then I had 2 years to go and just figure out how to be a journalist. And it was about a year left in that fellowship. I had learned about this, you know, I picked up this story of what was happening inside the Pakistani Taliban and wrote a 600-word pitch to the New York Times Magazine. Again, I'm already here. It's not going to cost me that much. I can do it. And they assigned that story, and that was kind of, you know, that was my mantra.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think one of the things I keep telling, you know, like when I go back to Columbia, which is my alma mater, I keep telling students the most important thing is like knowing how to report. I know that the journalism is changing so quickly, and you know, when I was in grad school, 2007, my big fear was, oh my God, I have to go back to Nepal, which is where I came from to study here, and I was like, everything was changing so quickly. I was like, okay, I need to learn how to do video, I need to learn how to do audio, photos, I need to write. And that sort of, I realized halfway through the year, it put me in this position where I wasn't really good at anything, but I could do everything, right? And soon enough, like, you know, I was just like, okay, I think, like, you know, I've always wanted to be a foreign correspondent. So I started focusing more on international reporting classes. So one thing, like, you know, if there's one thing that sort of like carried me along, you know, over the last 6-7 years, is knowing how to report. I can go to a country, I can report for a newspaper, I can write a story, and that's the most important thing, is you have to know how to tell a story. Other thing is, like, you know, what Nick said, right now, if you're traveling, you're in a country, make sure you know the kind of stories that you want to pitch. Make sure you know what you're talking about and have a really good grasp of, you know, what is it that you want to do, rather than putting a very broad sort of, oh, I'm going to be in India and I want to cover the elections, or, you know, I want to be in this country and do X. Have a very specific, like, I think the Pulitzer model is great because, you know, they ask you to do 150 to 200 word pitch, which is perfect. You know, I don't want to read a long email. I want like a graph of what you want to do. And I think a lot of publishers now, especially with, like, you know, the online sort of field is growing so quickly, you don't have to worry about having a byline in the Times or the Post, or you can write for Vice, you can write for BuzzFeed, and those stories are shared and read by more people than you've ever imagined. So I'm just continuing encouraging that, focusing on reporting.
And I just want to elaborate on the part about honing your craft. That it's important to know how to do all sorts of different things in this day and age, but it's also more important to figure out what your form is, right? Because writing a magazine piece is very different from making a documentary, and that's very different from audio storytelling, right? They're all different types of storytelling. And I think, like any craft, the more you do it, right, you look back at your early drafts and you grow and you get better and better and better. So while it's important to have some basic multimedia skills, I think pick the area that you love and focus and watch people too. I mean, I agree you need to be out there, but I also think what I learned the most was from working with really talented producers or filmmakers or reporters, right, and watching them. So even if you can't work with them directly, if you're watching them work and really understanding the decisions they make.
Thank you.
Can you have the microphone right behind
Oh.
you?
Okay, hi, my name is Cara Darton, and I have a question for each of you, and I hope they're not too long. For Kyra, can you talk about the challenges of the nonprofit model reporting that you use?
Yes.
For Nick, what's the secret sauce to getting a story run in the New Yorker? For Anup, recently I had an experience with AJ Plus when a story I did for Pulitzer was considered a bit too newsy for their millennial audience, and I realized that there was an increasing trend in journalism, BuzzFeed among those, Vice, et cetera, to cater to this audience, and in many ways to change the tone and substance of the story to reach this millennial audience. Can you speak to how to maintain the integrity of the story and still reach this audience? And for Mark, can you speak about your challenges about starting journalism at a later point in your life, and how you meet your financial needs like retirement, healthcare, and things that, for example, I'm starting to worry about right now?
Well, so I left 60 Minutes to build Retro Report, and one of the reasons I left is I was really excited and interested in the nonprofit model. That there is something, we're really lucky. We spend months and months and months reporting stories, and we're
Kyra, really quick, can you turn
Yes.
it back on? I just want you to, I want them to be able to hear you on the video. Yeah, so the red light is good.
Hello.
That's good, so leave it there. Thank you.
So the nonprofit model is really great for doing work that you care about and being able to spend the time and if the nonprofit shares your mission, right? But
Technical difficulties aside, apologies.
But how to keep that nonprofit sustaining, how to grow as a nonprofit. I mean, we're a digital first company. That was really important to us. We're building an archive of modern news events. We want it to be free for people to interact with, for years and years to come. That's part of our mission. But that's different from the daily news model, right? And we may be often the most trafficked video on the New York Times website, but what does that mean in terms of sustaining yourself as an organization? And I think we're in a tricky time where as the for-profit journalism is struggling, hopefully nonprofits can jump in to fill the gap a little bit.
So I couldn't really, speak to the AJ Plus or Vice or something, but I can speak about a very specific thing on how BuzzFeed does these. Obviously, I mean, AJ Plus is a very sort of like Facebook-centric audience, so I'm sure their way of handling the story is very different. But one of the things, so it's gonna be like I'm like BuzzFeed PR right now. So BuzzFeed is basically people see BuzzFeed as oh, the site that does cat videos, right? I still get it from so many people. BuzzFeed has the buzz arm, and then it has the news arm, and then it has the life arm. And if you're on Facebook, you'll notice a lot of these amazing videos about cooking in 30 seconds, or Americans try Indian food for the first time, see their reaction. That's all buzz and life and that sort of stuff. I work for the news division, and there are about 300 people now, including the foreign section, which has correspondents at least in 7-8 countries. We just hired someone in Senegal, and now a national security reporter. Our goal is to do stories that that tell a story obviously, but also doesn't quite like, we don't want people to dumb it down for like that millennial audience kind of a thing, but we want it to be very sort of gripping. And I think that's, that happens at the Washington Post too. When I was at the Post, we weren't really like, into stories where like the nut graph was like 5th paragraph down. We wanted people to like, say what was happening right up top. And I think BuzzFeed model is almost, the same. We do encourage people to think about headlines a lot because headlines is very important. So that's where we do a lot of back and forth, whether it is with our correspondents or with the freelancers that I work in. But never do we say, we want you to do this, or, we want you to do that. But we will have suggestions on how to sort of make it more colorful, bring some characters higher up, or, get rid of a lot of the sort of Wikipedia sort of like knowledge reference that we don't need in that story. Because, in a video, as Mark said before, 3 to 4 minutes, print story, we get metrics on how far down people read. So we have to be careful about what's on top of the story. If you're looking at it as an editor, when you scroll, you will see 100% of people read up to here. Then 83% people read through here, and then 67. So by the time 3 scrolls, imagine on your laptop, you're already losing readers. So how do you try to keep your readers up there? So as an editor, our job is to make sure it's tight, it's gripping, and it's sort of like character and energy driven.
So 3 things just to pick up on the last sort of series of things we were talking about. And then I'll go to the secret sauce question. You are sort of, remember that you are in some ways competing to try and stand out from the crowd and convince editors. So it really helps to know what else is out there. So if you're trying to pitch a story, if you're in India and you're trying to convince Anup to pay for your plane ticket to go to Myanmar, you've got to be able to say, the coverage so far that's been done in the New York Times or the Washington Post or wherever has been this. What I propose to do is different in this such and such a way. So that's one thing. The other thing is that as you're reading, as you're finding stories that you like, and you're not sure why you like them, but you read a story, it's either a newspaper story, magazine story, or it's a documentary. I know that terrain less well, but or not at all. But when you see something you like, often stop and try and break it down. Try and figure out why it works. I actually have done this with Kyra's husband's stories for years. Her husband is David Grant, who was the sort of maestro at the New Yorker. And when I first started, I would just take his stories and read them and deconstruct them and figure out like, how did he do it? What does this paragraph do? This paragraph this is the character paragraph. This is and it almost in a way at the end, it makes it a little bit easier to see how we pulled it all together. But it also kind of makes it, you realize that, okay, this is in some ways, and when another New Yorker writer, so you call it, had said at some point that this is really paint by numbers. You try to kind of demystify the process. So I think that's something really helpful to do as an exercise as well. And just the third thing is in terms of learning at this range, you do one thing well, and you're going to be successful at it. And whether it's writing magazine stories or making documentaries or as an editor, there's a question, well, like, does anyone pay for magazines anymore? You're right. The pool is smaller and smaller and smaller, but if you do it well, you'll find success. Now, the question of the secret sauce, was your question more, how do you, because convincing the New Yorker to commission a story and then turning it in and having it run in timely fashion are 2 very different things. Okay, so, I had been pitching the magazine for 6-7 years probably before they finally assigned the first story. The first story that was assigned was a sort of an evergreen feature about a court martial in which a guy was tried 3 times for murder. It was a typical twisty New Yorker story in which you could then delve into the military justice system. While I was reporting that, the bin Laden raid happened, and I went back to them and said, actually, I have an incredible source, and I can do this story in a way that no one else will be able to do this story. And that story was assigned within 5 minutes of me sending that email saying, I just left lunch with this person, and he's going to talk to me. That story was assigned, and then I filed the story on a Friday, and it appeared the following Friday. It appeared the following 10 days later in print. It's never happened again. So it really kind of depends on, it depends on the subject matter. But I mean, a good pitch is going to get you in the door, some name recognition, persistence, you know, just having a track record in which you can point to other stories. But, you know, I also know, you know, there are some writers there who, I think Sarah Stillman, who's done some amazing work for the magazine for years, had no record of stories, no bylines really before that at all. And now has won, I think, 2 or 3 national magazine awards in the past couple of years. So there are many ways, I think, to just think at.
As for working towards financial security, I guess the best advice I could give you is don't do what I did. Because I mean, I never really thought about it. I mean, I got into it late. You know, like I said, I didn't graduate from undergraduate school until I was 30, and then I started working right away. But I was working for, I mean, everything I'd done, I just did. You know, like I'd do watermelon picking for a while and hay baling. I did airline catering, and I never really thought about, well, the next job will come along and something will come. And then when I got into journalism, you know, I started, my first paper was a New York Times owned paper. I used to get New York Times stock at the end of every year and get it at a discount. I should have been putting that away. I cashed it in as soon as I got it, because it already came with a 15%, you know, discount. So I'm already getting my 15% on it, and I'm buying camera equipment because I'm a photographer, and you know, that's what it takes. So, and I kind of kept on doing that, and then really the only thing I ever did, the only investment I ever made that paid off was the house I got in Syracuse when I moved to Syracuse to teach. But when I quit my job, the first thing I did was sell my house. And that's what funded, that's what enabled me to go travel around the country. So, I mean, the other thing too is when I sold my house, the first thing I did was pay off all my bills. I mean, I was debt free for the first time in 20 years. And to me, that was liberating. I mean, I know a more responsible person might have said, well, how can I invest some of this money? I'm thinking, let's go travel around and have some fun. So I don't recommend that. I mean, I think you want to be thinking about just putting away. It's that old model, and it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to sustain that now, because if you put money in a bank, you get 0 point nothing interest. So, but you got to think of some type of investment strategies for yourself. And then I would say the other thing I would tell you is, once you're at a comfortable spot, and particularly if you're at a spot where you think you know you're going to be, buy a home. I mean, it really is one of the easiest one for any of us to do, because we're going to have to be paying that money out for rent anyway. And at least then you're getting some equity. And at the end of the year, the tax breaks you get is, which, you know, whenever I got those, I pissed those away too. But so I would always get a lot of money when, you know, at the end of every year when I had a house. So, but anyway, don't do the things I do. Start saving and start putting some money away.
You know, one of the things, like as you know, students or like, you know, sort of like graduates, we were like getting grants to go out and reporting.
Can you get, sorry.
Oh. I mean, I can't, like, you know, stress how important it is to sort of like pitch different kind of stories to different publications. I've seen a lot of friends do it. I know, like, I mean, you know, if you're interested in doing one big long form stuff for New Yorker, I think it pays quite well, so you're fine. But, you know, I mean, if you're doing you could do a story for BuzzFeed, you could do it for AZ Plus, you know, just be versatile and, like, you know that you can pitch different ideas. If you're spending 10 days in a country, you can do 3 stories, and that's what I've always done with the Pulitzer grant stuff, is like do multiple different stories, pitch to different people, so you're making the best out of your stuff.
I have a question.
One more to add to that, and when you talk about pitching different stories, think about completely different stories. I remember when I was a student at the University of Florida, an undergraduate student, we had these alumni, this couple that came in, a writer and a photographer couple. And they would explain how when they go someplace to do a story, say they're doing a news story, they'd work together on that. But then during that same trip, they would go around to get information about the architecture and do a story for an architecture magazine. They would connect with chefs and different restaurants and do something for a food magazine. And then you just build in your contact list, and wherever you go, these are things that have interest now all over. So, you know, it's not just this way. You're not kind of doing 3 different news stories, because then you can get some resentment from the editors. Well, why didn't you give me this piece? So it's just something to think about, really broaden the types of stories you do.
You guys have spoken a little bit about writing pitches. I was curious, when a journalist is like in the room with an editor and they're trying to convince them about their pitch, kind of what is it that you can say, or is it something that you really can't say and you just have to show when you're pitching to an editor? Maybe if the editors want to start with this one. Thank you.
Well, so again, I mentioned we spend months and months on stories, so, and we spend a lot of money on them. So our process is, you're usually a freelancer is invited to submit a pitch, although we would take a pitch from an outside person who's not invited, and we do get them unsolicited pitches, but usually you're invited to submit a pitch. And then if I like the pitch, then we would have a meeting. But the meeting is really to make sure that you've thought through, that you kind of get our form to the point of knowing the place, right? So if somebody comes to a meeting and says, I watched 20 retro reports and the ones I love best are these, and this is how my piece will be different, this is how it'll be similar, this is my voice, this is what I want to do with it. That's what I want to hear, right? I don't want them all to be the same, but I want to understand that they know what we're doing is different. It's not a 60 minutes piece. It's not a feature-length doc. So that's what I'm looking for. If you're in the meeting, I like the idea enough that I can see it happening, and then I want to know that you get who we are and what we're doing. Great advice.
I think it's like pretty simple for us. I mean, it all goes back to like, how much homework have you done on a specific pitch, like it's different between like, I mean, I guess it's similar for freelancers as well as correspondents, but with correspondents, I mean, they spend like weeks trying to, investigate something like, if you're doing a story on refugees, but you're trying to figure out a specific angle, like, they will come up with a list of sources in country X, country Y, the government people they're going to interview, security situation, how much we need to invest in terms of security and all of that stuff. And that sort of plays into a decision about whether we want to do something like that, or also like, if a competitor has already done it, or does it make sense to do that story right now. With freelancers, it's a little bit different. We're always like, interested in doing something new. I had this like pitch from Jerusalem the other day. Everybody was pitching. I was like, oh, I want to write about the rising violence in Jerusalem. That sounds like anybody, like, I mean, what are you going to do about it, right? So somebody pitched a really interesting story about the use of social media, like Snapchat specifically, about how people were playing Snapchat and how that was like, factoring this violence, or like how people are using it. And that was a very fascinating pitch. It was like 2 paragraphs, and it's like, great, it's unique. The person gets it, that BuzzFeed audience is into sort of like, the social media thing, especially, and a lot of people are, Snapchat is like the second most widely used social media, app now. So we're like, sold.
Great, thank you. Just one more thing that I wanted to add, because it follows up on a question on the last panel a little bit, is when I left 60 Minutes to come to Retroport, and I was the first person there, the very first thing I did was write our ethics and standard policy. And I have had to add to it and add to it and add to it. And now we actually always assign someone from our staff to work with the freelancer, because I'm so worried about it. I did grow up in the kind of news system, and so I took it for granted that people had the same kind of training that I had, and that's just not the case. So the other thing I really look for is people who understand the ethics and the people who are thinking about that. So that conversation before with everyone on the panel, that these are the things that really matter. Now, part of it is, again, because we see ourselves as, we like to say, if reporting's the first draft, journalism's the first draft, if history were the second draft, right? So it really matters to us. We have fact checking that no television program actually has. We have a very, very arduous fact checking process. So we care a lot about getting it right. I mean, everybody does, but I think we're really obsessive about it. And so that matters a lot to me too, that people get, signal in some way that they understand the complexities that are at play.
Thank you. Do we have more questions from the audience?
Yeah, sort of a question for the editors as well. I imagine you guys and editors at publications everywhere had your email accounts are just inundated by pitches all the time, and so I was wondering if you have just sort of any little bits of advice to aspiring journalists as like how we can make sure that our pitches actually get read.
For me, the subject line is very important in an email. Like, it's true. Like, I was telling, like, I get like right now I'm getting like 3 pitches a day from Myanmar, and I think the subject line is sort of like the headline, right? That's what's going to make you click more. I know I'm like sounding very like BuzzFeedy now, but that's really what's going to make you open. But I do as an editor, I check like every single email that comes in my inbox. And I go through them and I actually discuss it with my editor in New York, saying, what do you think about this? If it's like really, really bad, I don't bother to discuss with an editor. But if I like it and I feel like we need to hire that freelancer, then I'll say. But I think, again, it goes back to have a really like specific subject line about what, think about what your story is going to be, and then just have like 2 paragraphs on, what the story pitch is, how you're going to accomplish it, just very specific, like research reported stuff. Don't write like a long sort of, list of things you want to do, or like long background, like, we don't need to know, like, there's been war going on since 1965 and all of that stuff, right? I just want very specific stuff.
So I usually, someone vets them and then they come to me, so I'm not the first eye on them usually. And by the time she gives them to me, she's at least done some due diligence. So I trust her.
So one thing that I've noticed is pick up the phone. Everybody emails. Yeah. There's this concern that you're gonna bother an editor, but it means so much more if you just sent an email. You give them some time, but like 6 hours later or the next day, call, follow up. Hey, I sent you a note yesterday. I just want to make sure you got it. Being able to match a voice with a face goes so far. And I think that it replaces, the question was like, what do you do when you get in the room with an editor? You're probably not going to pitch an editor face to face or freelancer. I think I pitched, it doesn't work as well for me. I find it's easier for me to lay out the story on paper than it is for me to go in and pitch it in person. But picking up the phone, I think really I've had some great success. I actually had some really bizarre conversations. I remember one time I called from Pakistan. I called an editor at Vanity Fair who was maybe, I don't know, like the number 2 or number 3 person at Vanity Fair. And I called them and they picked up, and I thought that they were the person, but they were actually like the assistant. And I was like, fuck, I can't believe I just got this person on the phone. I'm like pitching them and they're like, oh, this sounds amazing. And then he's like, yeah, just send it to my email. And it wasn't certainly the name that I thought it was. It was some assistant. But I mean, it's just really, you're now in that person's head. And so I think it makes a world of difference.
Well, did you get through the story too?
No, I did not get the story.
One thing, and I see it a lot of like, people do it these days. Do not tweet at me and say, do you want a story? Like, never do that. And don't write on Facebook either, right? Like, but I've also like seen a lot of people email and ask for coffee, and I welcome that. And I think that's a really good way of like maintaining a relationship. Have some good ideas in your head. You don't have to come up with like, one specific story ideas, but ask for coffee, like, you're always learning from these editors anyway. Be interested in what their publication's about, know what the kind of stories that they're publishing, and come up with a couple of good ideas and say, these are the sort of things that I've been interested in, and good luck to be in touch. Then you can email always again, right?
And to get, sorry, just one more quick thing about the emailing phone thing. This gets a little bit ahead of where we are in the conversation, but when you're reporting a story and you're beginning to figure out, you're sort of mapped out your constellation of who it is that you want to talk to, and you're sending emails, it's the easiest way to say, I don't want to talk to this person if you send them an email. So 3 things. Phone calls are, you don't have to catch them off guard, but you suddenly now you're in their space and you've caught their attention. Letters, I send letters to people's houses all the time. It's a way of, like, if I know the person doesn't want to talk to me, I'll send a letter to someone's house. Oftentimes, send it via FedEx, just 1 page, send a letter to their house. Now all of a sudden you're there. Are
they handwritten?
No, I type them out, but sign them and all that. But include a business card. Sometimes include a piece that again, finding your audience. I was trying to convince this Chicago detective who had 38 misconduct allegations against him and had this story I was working on most likely beat a confession out of the guy that I was writing had been wrongfully convicted, who 6 months after my piece came out was pardoned and is now exonerated and a free man. So when I reached out to this detective originally, I emphasized that I came from a military family. I knew that I needed, like, now is the time to try and stress, but now is not the time to send him my most antagonize the government stories, but the ones to send him the sort of the good guys win-ish kind of stories. So I sent him a piece about the DEA busting some drug trafficker, arms trafficker. I emphasized the fact that I came from a military family. I knew that he had spent some time in the military as well. And he called me back the next day. So that's another thing. And then the third thing, of course, is just showing up at someone's door. It's so fun. It's nerve-wracking. You oftentimes get doors shut in your face, but approaching someone or showing up when they're giving a talk, if they've been avoiding you and showing up when they've been giving a talk and asking them afterwards, hey, I just traveled all the way from DC, where this happened in California a few months ago. I said, I just got on a 6-hour flight. Just give me a few minutes of your time. He said no, but it's a great scene in the piece because it just shows he's avoiding you sort of at all costs. So
that's a source, not an editor.
That's a source, yeah.
Don't do that. Or if you did show up with some loaf of bread or something.
I think Austin has a question.
Yeah. I want to say I said this with the last panel as well, but thanks so much for the insight. It's been really invaluable. We've talked a lot about pitching initial stories, but all of us have been abroad, or most of us have gone abroad already, written a lot of pieces. And I was just wondering if the process of pitching a story that's already been written, that's already been produced to a publication, differs from pitching just the topic of a story before it's been produced.
Yeah, just I got the mic real quick. I mean, I think that I think it's really challenging because I think an editor. My experience with that is that an editor wants to get their hands in the piece. They want to be able to work it into. So even if it's done, I'll always encourage writers to send a really, really, really well thought out. You can take, if you've done the piece, you've done all the reporting, then those 2 paragraphs are going to be better than the 2 paragraphs you would have sent 6 months ago. But you can just say like, hey, I've done a lot of reporting on this. You don't have to say I've got a piece done and here it is as a Microsoft Word attachment. I feel like it's suicidal.
I totally agree with that. Like I think sending like a reported story and saying I just came back and did this is like a terrible idea. I have never known, like, at least from working at the Washington Post or BuzzFeed, like when we've just sort of like opened up it, like, and looked at it. But sending the 2 paragraphs or you've just not graphed from that story and saying, I have this, do you think like you'd be interested in that? That would be more welcome.
I mean, our process is so unique that it wouldn't ever, I mean, if somebody went out and actually shot a retro report film without us, I guess I would consider it, but I can't imagine that would ever happen.
Have some more questions? Yes? A comment? Okay. Pointing.
I just want to add to what this discussion we've just been having about. I think it's really important to maintain whatever connections you have, not only with an editor, but your professors you have down that you've established a relationship who meant something to you. Don't let them go. And I didn't do nearly as well on this as I should have along the way, but stay in touch with them. They'll help you. They care about you. They can help you as your own career develops, and as you meet someone, if you pitch an editor, if you pitch somebody, you're working with somebody. I think Allison was talking about staying in touch with pictures, but also people you meet along the way. That we had my best story about this is working with a young reporter I met in Riga, Latvia. He was just out of college in like 1991 or so, and we struck up a conversation, and then he wrote me and he got in touch with me, followed up, he called me up, he came when he got to Washington, he came to see me, and then it turned out, I didn't know this, but Tom Hunley, our senior editor here, some of you have met, had a similar experience with this young man who was stringing, trying to pick up whatever he could get along the way. And over the next 15 years or longer, he stayed in touch with both of us independently. I didn't know Tom at the time. And this was David Rode, who went on to be a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner. And he's on our board today, and phenomenal reporter and journalist and person. But he, like nobody else I knew, he cultivated people. I don't think David has ever let go of anybody he's met along the way. And he's learn so much from them. And we've all, in different ways, David, he looked back and said, he's not somebody who needed much help, you would think, but he got a lot of help from a lot of us who kind of knew him along the way and just recognized that he was a young person of great talent. And you all have a lot of talent, and you should, don't be afraid of establishing relationships, because others who come before you, they really do want to help you.
It'll make you a better person generally, because you won't be mean to anybody when you realize that that person could, in 6 months or 6 years, at some point be the guy when you realize that, oh wow, I was such a jerk to them on the last story because they wouldn't share something with me, or because, you know, I was just a jerk to them, and then all of a sudden you realize that they're running some organization that like handles refugees and they're based in Greece, and you need to talk to them. Like, that's the guy that you have to go through. I mean, I think it's a good way just to remember to be nice.
I think in general, like, I mean, obviously it's a very small world, but
Can we use the microphone, sorry, as much as you can.
ours is a very, like, I mean, our community is a very, very small world, just in general. You run into the same people so often, and in different countries and around the world. Like, I've run into like editors and correspondents in airports in Afghanistan, like, like on transits when you're like, reporting in a different country. So like maintaining that relationship is so important.
So speaking of maintaining relationships, a lot of us are pretty new in our careers. So how do you suggest we start those relationships? Like as of right now, for pitching, I'm sending to like submissions@washingtonpost.com, which sounds like no one's reading that, and I know that. But
I was just about to tell you why.
Exactly. So it's like, but I don't know any editors at the Washington Post, their personal email, and they're not online, and I've done so much stalking, and it's, it's harder. Maybe not Washington Post, but other like Vice, for example, purposely doesn't like put their editor stuff online. So I guess my question is like, how do you go about finding those editors and starting up a connection? And maintaining is great, but we need to start them first. So I guess how do you suggest we do that?
So I say this in a very nice way, like, stalking them is the best way to do it. And now because of like social media, it's like so much easier. And I think more and more publications, even on print, they put emails of the reporters, at the bottom of the thing. So you can always email reporters, but you can find out who the editor is by going on any website, right? So in Washington Post case, like submissions at Washington Post will never really probably get you anywhere because nobody is probably reading it. Right. But if you know who the editor of Washington Post foreign section is, or who the editor of like national desk is, same thing with like you go on Twitter. It's so easy to just like look up on Twitter, and just directly contacting them, and then like following some of the things like Nick said earlier, like calling them. It's better to probably call. I get so many calls on my phone at the Washington Post, like there's people calling and pitching stories, because all you do is call the main line and say I want to speak to the foreign desk. They'll transfer you, right? So that is one of the ways. But for someone like you, who's already done a little bit of reporting, you have those stories. You want to like start reaching out to these people very specifically and say, can we do coffee? I would appreciate this. Like or like organize a tour at the New York Times or organize a tour at the Washington Post, and that's how you start building those relationships.
I agree with that too, and I also think that it's important to. Go to conferences, go to the places where these people are speaking and make a direct connection with them after a talk. The other thing you can do is join associations. There are professional associations for journalists. I'm the president of the National Press Photographers Association. So there's a lot of interaction between members. Society of Professional Journalists, so many organizations like that. You want to kind of broaden your the sweep of the people that you're interacting with, and not just rely on it when you can do it socially. And coming up to somebody after they speak at a conference, you kind of approach it as a social thing and give them your comments, but then also say you have a business card, and then just start collecting them business cards.
I mean, you really have to show them you're hungry. That's like the most important thing.
Do you have any more questions? I think I'm going to find this mic here. I think we have time for a couple short questions or one question for everybody. Good? Guys, yeah, great.
Sorry.
No.
Thank you all so much for being here. And I guess, Nick, this question is more specifically for you, talking about writing, like however you phrased it earlier, long and cinematic New Yorker kind of stuff, right? So I'm specifically with the way you're recording things and organizing things, like, I mean, you referenced the Tyrone Hood story earlier. I mean, are you more like Gay to Lee's using note cards or using Google Docs? I mean, because the more advanced I've gotten as a reporter, the longer I'm writing and the more I've struggled and tried to figure out the best way to organize and shape and then eventually finally write.
Yeah, that's a great question. So my method, I use Scrivener is my word processor, and I use a LiveScribe pen. The LiveScribe is amazing for several reasons. One of which, it's really disarming. You're not sticking a tape recorder in someone's face, and I'll tell them as I start writing. Does everyone know what LiveScribes are? It's a pen that you get a special notepad with, and the pen has like dimpled paper. And it records, like if I was writing right now, it would capture the audio as I was writing. So I don't have to be taking down every single note. I can write orange sweater question. And then I'll just, when I go back after the interview, I just tap with my mouse on orange, on any place in orange sweater question, and it'll bring up your question at that point. And so I've got all the audio. I'm also taking notes. And like I said, I'm not sticking a recorder in someone's face. So I will generally transcribe those notes with sort of thoughts and comments, and just put them all in one long document. And then it doesn't take long before I can sort of see what the potential arc of the story is, and I'll start setting up an outline. When you've got so much material like that piece, for instance, I think that so oftentimes in terms of words in my sort of note document, I'm talking sometimes like 200,000 words of notes that go into a 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 word piece. So I'm going through each interview and I'm highlighting what I think I want to use. And I'm oftentimes putting an X at the top of that interview so that I then know what material I've actually inserted into the sort of working outline I've got. So all the time I'm building and putting stuff in. And then at the end, I've got this, oftentimes like 30, 40,000 word outline that's got a bunch of extraneous stuff, but then I can start kind of winnowing that down. It takes me a long time to write, probably because it's not the most efficient way to do it. But that way I know that with each sort of swipe, I'm not missing any material, I'm not overlooking any material, and everything that I've gotten, I know I wanted to put in, and I sort of give it a second and third thought before I decide whether it stays in the piece or not.
Really quick clarification, if I could, when you're saying these 200,000 word transcripts, so is that like different sources? You're literally having just one long document that's 200,000 words or something?
Yeah, exactly. But I'll have, within that, and also make up a new Scrivener file for each story. So I've got one that's all notes. I've got one that's questions. I've got one that's my outline. I've got, one once I start writing, I'll write by section rather than writing by the whole piece, and so then I can just combine them in the end. It's so much easier to be working. It's so much easier to be working on a smaller piece of material. I went and saw Don DeLillo speak in New York a couple of weeks ago. He writes one paragraph per page. Now it was a really bizarre sort of cantankerous conversation, but he delighted in the fact that he writes one paragraph per page because then he can see, and then he stacks up the pages. So for a novel, he'll have like this on it. Which again, I don't think that writers are necessarily the most efficient, but so that's kind of, that's generally how I proceed. I'm always looking for a new efficient way, so if anybody has a better way.
Well, I want to thank you all for, and if you have more questions, maybe we can talk on the way. Some of you guys who are coming to lunch, I think in about 10 minutes, I don't have a watch on. In about 10 minutes, we're going to walk over to India Gate, and it's a very short walk. But if you guys have questions for our speakers here, I'm sure they'll be happy to stay a moment, or maybe we'll kind of go out there so you're not all crowded in the back. But I really want to thank all of you for giving us golden advice, the kinds of things that you guys told us, and I think definitely the journalists here will agree. So thanks.
Thank you.